Hello and welcome. We're going to be going over beekeeping basics in the state of Alaska. As a beekeeper, there's certain equipment that you need in order to protect yourself from the bees. Basic equipment that you need is a bee veil that's going to go over your face to protect your face, some type of protective clothing, and usually you want something that's pretty heavyweight that the bees cannot sting through. Gloves to protect your hands, and then a good pair of shoes. For myself, I use a pair of monk boots, and that seems to do pretty well. In the state of Alaska, bees have a very difficult time overwintering. So what we do is every spring, we get a shipment of bees from usually the state of California, and they'll arrive usually around middle of April. They'll come either in plastic or wooden frames, and then that's how it gets transported up from California and delivered to us, and that's how we hive them. Usually, a shipment of bees, one of these containers will usually have anywhere between 15 to 20,000 bees already in them, and then the queen is in her own separate little cage, and that's also transported in that box. And that way, the queen is kept away from all the other bees, so they don't smother her. And also because they don't want her to go ahead and start trying to lay eggs until the queen bee and the bees get hived. Honeybees have existed for millions of years. There's been uh, proof that in some prehistoric caves that there's been drawings of bees, and also they found jars of honey that was still good. In the hive, you have three different types of bees. You have the queen bee, and usually there should only be one queen per hive, and she's the one that lays all the eggs. And then you have the worker bee, and the worker bee is the sexually underdeveloped female, and a full-size bee colony would be about 60,000 of the worker bee, and their job is to collect food and water for the colony and to build the wax comb, and also they do the maintenance of the hive. And then you have the drone bee, and pretty much the drone bee's job is to impregnate the female. All right, the life cycle of a bee is the queen's going to go around to all the different places on the hive, and she's going to lay an egg, and then that will get covered and will develop into a larva, and then it'll go into metamorphism, and then a grown honeybee will come out of that. So there's the egg. It looks like a grain of rice. And it's hard to tell, but that's the larva stage. It just looks like kind of like a little slug. Then after about 21 days, it develops from the egg stage all the way into the grown stage, and it emerges from the comb as a new bee. And depending on the type of bee that's being grown, they all have different gestation periods. Like it says, a queen emerges in 16 days, a worker, which is the most common bee, 21 days, and then a drone usually takes 24 days for it to emerge. And each of the cells, depending on if it's a queen cell, a worker cell, or a drone cell, is going to look different. The queen cell is going to kind of look like a little finger as it hangs down, as you can see up here. And then a worker cell is just the normal, what you usually see in a beehive, and then a drone cell is going to look very similar to that, but because the drones have larger bodies, it's actually going to stick out just a little bit more than a worker cell. Usually on a hive, you'll have 4 different boxes. You'll have 2 brooder boxes and then 2 honey boxes. And each of those boxes will have 10 frames. A normal frame will have all the different cells where the bees are being developed. And then up here, the white, that's actually stored honey. And that's what they use for energy and for food. So in a beehive, you usually have the bottom board with the entrance reducer, and that's where the bees, some of the bees will come in and out of that. And then you have what's called the brooder box, and some hives will have what's called a queen excluder, where that queen cannot get up to the higher frames. And they do that because they want those frames just to be free from larvae and everything like that, so it'll just be pure honey. And then at the very top, you'll have the inner cover, which will usually have a little cutout right here, so bees can come out that way also. And then you have the top cover that protects it from the weather. When the weather starts getting a little bit colder in the state of Alaska, it's time to go ahead and end the season of beekeeping. And so 21 days before we're ready to harvest the honey, we'll go ahead and go back in the hive, and we'll find the queen, and we'll go ahead and put her back in her little box, and then we'll wait 21 days. Because like we talked about, the life cycle from the queen laying the egg to it hatching is usually about 21 or 24 days. And so that way, all the eggs and all the larvae have hatched, and we won't have any larvae or eggs in our honey. Then it's time to collect all those frames, and we'll bring them into the garage or the house, and then we'll have an extractor. And what the extractor does is it uses centrifugal force, and it'll usually be electric or a hand crank. The one my family and I use is a hand crank. And so you'll put usually either 2 or 4 frames in there so it's balanced, and you'll start twirling the hand crank, and the centrifugal force will cause the honey to separate from the cells, and it'll come out on the walls, and then it'll drip down, and then there's a place right here where you can unscrew that and allow the honey to drip out. You also put something like looks like a colander down there. What it does is any wax or any larvae or any bee parts that are in the honey, it'll kind of try to separate those, because of course that's undesirable. You don't want that in your honey. That concludes my presentation about beekeeping in the state of Alaska. Do I have any questions? All right, thank you very much.